office. What are we in for? So today I have with me Anthony Shaffer. Welcome.
Hey, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, you're a cyber operations expert. I know that. You've worked as a senior intelligence officer, operations officer with the FBI, NSA, CIA, who knows how many other agencies. And your work was to develop both offensive and defensive cyber capabilities. You founded Project
Correct.
Sentinel. Want to hear about that. So tell me more about who you are and what matters to you.
Well, I'm a retired spy. You kind of said that. I worked in the early days of cyber operations before anybody really understood the internet in the late 90s. We were developing what you correctly identified as weaponized technology, looking at the variety of new technologies, mostly focused on the internet and information and data mining, things like that, that were at the time brand new. And we were able to start developing those capabilities as part of our targeting, both for intelligence operations and special operations, groups, individuals, countries, which we felt were going to be threats within the context of military planning and operations. I'm a DoD guy. I'm not CIA. I was trained by CIA, but my work was all focused on primarily Department of Defense, the senior policy level, strategic level. We did some tactical things, but most of it was focused on strategic targets such as, Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, um, global terrorism like Al Qaeda and ISIS, things like that. So that's what we did in the 90s. Um, I was a whistleblower on 9/11 issues on something called Able Danger, which was a pre 9/11 set of black operations, which were focused on developing Al Qaeda as a target set before 9/11. This was in the late 90s, early 2000s, before 9/11. And then obviously I've worked as an advisor to multiple organizations and people since then. So,
And so you were involved in the DoD relating to the same bad actors, that cast of characters that we have still today. Iran, Hezbollah, well,
right,
Al Qaeda, of course, Russia, China, all of that. And
right.
I would love to go into April Danger. We won't go there because there's too much to talk about.
There would be a lot to talk about.
Yeah. So national security, it seems to all touch on and is affected by so many areas of policy, law, the Constitution, our way of life.
Right.
And it's almost like there's a connection to every aspect of our life, or virtually. Maybe not
Absolutely.
how I
Absolutely.
make Middle Eastern food for my husband. That it doesn't touch on. But it hits immigration, election integrity or election fraud, economy, foreign agents, obviously foreign policy, the military, even higher education. We see that now more than ever. Lawfare,
Mhm.
weaponization,
Right.
integrity of our agencies themselves, including the Secret Service. So if in Kamala's America, will our national security be compromised? And what is the threat? What does that look like?
Well, the threat basically, let me define the threat to the republic. I'm tired of people calling it a democracy. We don't have a democracy, it's a
It's not a
republic.
democracy, we know.
Yeah, and so the fundamental issue at this point is the quote unquote deep state. The deep state is also, I think, more popularly known by the left as the permanent bureaucracy. They don't like calling it the deep state. They try to basically soft pedal it and say it's the permanent bureaucracy, which does exist. It does operate as a fourth branch of government. Make no bones about the fact that they function separately, and that's one of the things that President Trump and others have come up against, to include the Democrats. JFK came up against the permanent bureaucracy when he was president back in 61, 62. So these are all issues which are go and Eisenhower, just as another foundational comment, General Eisenhower, President Eisenhower warned us in his exit speech of the military industrial congressional complex. Well, that's the deep state. And they're well funded. They tend to go with Democrats because Democrats, for better or for worse, see benefit of using their tools, techniques, and technology to benefit the left politically. And that's why you've seen, as you mentioned, universities, information systems, social media, these things all tend to lean left because the predominance of the control of these mechanisms of information, of the economy, the government, all seem to lean left. And I think it's pervasive. And that's what we face right now. So Kamala Harris, who was appointed to be the candidate, as you know, she did not receive a single vote in the primary. Joe Biden got 14 million, and it didn't matter in the end. They just decided, yeah, we don't care about democracy. They're the ones that say democracy, but they don't care about democracy because they avoided actually using democracy to pick their candidate. So Kamala was appointed. Now, Kamala is she's a shell. She, I think, fundamentally is a leftist who's been told if you want to become president, you've got to pretend to not be a leftist. Do you really think that she's going to be the best possible leader to go against global leaders, other global leaders, to deal with them when she has that attitude and demeanor? She's going to be she already is a laughing stock. So the idea somehow that she's going to become a statesman, statesperson, whatever you want to call it, is going to have that gravitas to represent the United States. I just don't, I think it's a bridge too far for her. But more importantly, the things which she would bring to the table policy-wise would be an extension and expansion of the Joe Biden policies, which have failed badly. And that was interesting. I was listening to NPR today, driving on some errands, and NPR had a number of millennials on saying, we don't feel that the current economic system is benefiting us, and they're not going to vote for Kamala, which I was shocked they had it on NPR, but they did. And this one Wall Street Journal reporter was on saying, well, Trump was kind of correct about inflation. It's not as bad as ever. It was worse. And it was worse in the 70s and 80s. And I lived through that. We're talking about, 10, 12% in some cases under Jimmy Carter. But it doesn't change the fact that 8 to 9% under Biden has been horrible. And they tried to explain it away. And they said, well, we can explain some of it away because of the spending that was in the Inflation Reduction Act, which really wasn't meant to reduce inflation.
No,
It was
those
actually the
euphemisms
new
are
Green
very
Deal.
bad too. It's just
Yeah,
like the Republic democracy thing.
right. Yeah, Joe Biden just within the last 3 days admitted, yeah, it was the new Green Deal, just relabeled. So that, he said, accounted for 3%. I think that's low. I think it was closer to 4 to 5. And he said, well, we don't know what caused the rest. Well, I can tell you what caused the rest. The rest was the purposeful removal of petroleum futures within the United States. And they kept bragging, oh, we are producing more gas than ever right now, which is not a lie, but it's not sustainable. What they're lying about is why the gas prices are high. The gas prices are high because the industry, the petrochemical industry, knows that they are being curtailed from finding new sources. That is to say, the regulatory state is making it difficult for them to get approvals to go exploit the known resources we know we have. That's number one. Number two, regarding the fact that if you don't have more sources in the works, that is to say, we have an economy that's growing. That economy requires a certain level of growth of energy in parallel with the growth of economy. That they're linked together. So the moment that the people who have to make decisions regarding energy sees that there's going to be a point where demand outsizes the availability, supply and demand, that's what's caused the higher prices, because there's going to be a point where that we cross the Rubicon, where this massive amount of production is going to take a nosedive because the available resources aren't going to keep up with the economy. People know this. This is economics 101, and yet the left seems, oh, we don't know why. Well, that's why, because in reality, they are going to try to force the U.S. to go to this green economy, these renewables, which are not renewable, by the way. I could go through all of that. I've actually got a degree in environmental studies, so I actually am a credentialed expert, which drives them nuts. And it's like, yeah, no, I know why the prices are high now. I know why in about a year, if we don't change things, Kamala's America, Kamala will further restrict and deny access for energy producers to find new sources, to actually put new wells in, to find new paths of petroleum for the American people. Those things are meant to be constricted at some point to push people over to this electric economy. Now, the reason they want to do that is not because they believe in environmental catastrophe. It's a lie. I can tell you for a fact that there's no man-made global warming. It's not. It's a fiction. It does not exist. If you go to Plymouth Rock from when the Pilgrims first landed, the Plymouth Rock is the same level now as it was back, 300, 400 years ago. It's not changed. There's no overall change of climate. As a matter of fact, if you look at the stats, people are less apt to be either harmed, moved, or die from weather-related events. It's going down, and noticeably. I mean, we're talking about a massive drop of people who are being displaced or suffer catastrophic consequences from weather. It's a lie. So what they've had to do is convince us otherwise by saying, well, it's going to happen. Yeah, we don't know where the global warming is going, but the heat's going somewhere. It's all a lie. And so what they're doing right now is convincing young people. That's why they have Greta Thunberg, who does not have a degree in anything, as their emotional spirit animal out there trying to scare people. It's all about scaring people and trying to divide them within the context of fear. And oh, just give us more money, it'll be fine. It won't be fine because there's no crisis. But that's my point. They are now trying to push the economy to a point where that we don't have sufficient fossil fuel. And in that crisis, they're going to say, oh, well, our only option is going to electric. Well, the thing they won't tell you is that all green energy depends on petrochemicals. There's nothing that can work. The very place you're sitting on a chair made of plastic, probably, which contains petrochemicals. I'm sitting in a desk that's covered by petrochemicals. The chair I sit in, the clothes we wear, if it's polyester, nylon, any of that's all petrochemicals. The roads, if you go out and drive on a blacktop road, that's petrochemicals. So the idea somehow that we're going to curtail the need of society to use petrochemicals, hydrocarbons, which, by the way, is renewable. We've now come to discover that it's not from dinosaurs. Fossil fuels are not fossil fuels. They're hydrocarbons, which are created over time by the internal processes of the planet. The planet has an iron core, a nickel iron core, which continues to generate heat. That cooking of the interior of the planet continues to combine basic carbon materials into hydrocarbons. That cooking is what creates petrochemicals. Those petrochemicals renew over time. So that's why at this point, there's virtually an unlimited supply of petrochemicals, which they won't talk to you about because it goes against their narrative. And it's all about a narrative of control because fundamentally, Trump is correct. This is about Marxism. This is about the idea of this state, becoming the determining factor and vector of energy, where it goes, who gets it, and how often they get it. That's why they want the Green New Deal. They want to have power that's controlled by the state. The state then controls your lives by extension, because if you have to go to the government to make sure that you get enough energy, like in California, well, you're going to have rolling blackouts. You're going to have all these things which happen. So if you want to see Kamala Harris's America on full display, just go look at Gavin Newsom's California, and that's the direction she wants to bring us all.
I completely agree that the Marxism is the ultimate goal in all of these things. You have to have a crisis. You have to create
Absolutely.
division.
Absolutely.
When I was young, we were taught that it was global cooling. And they had
Yes,
all the,
I remember
remember that? Do you remember that? And so there were deadlines. And
Oh
I
yeah,
don't, re-
Leonard Nimoy in search of climate, and they basically predicted that we would be living in a
Ice Age.
Arctic ice age by this time, by right now. So it didn't
Right.
happen.
And so none of the predictions came true. But the
Right,
goal of these things is you create a crisis and you also create division. So
right,
wokeism, CRT, race, race crises, if you will. And you just create all of these divisions and you create the crises and then you utilize those to institute controls. And
Right.
you're dumbing people down because they're so worried. Children today are so depressed and so concerned and suicidal and self-harming because
Right.
they think there is no future. That's why and if we continue that down that direction, they probably don't have the future, at least the future that they would wish for. And then you add the
Right.
economy, and young people can't have families or large families. Both spouses have to work, and you can't have a home that you own. So
Right.
they create all these crises, and it's all leading ultimately to a Marxist economy, a command and control economy. And of course, Marx had class. He had the proletariat, the bourgeois, and all that. So they just
Right.
flip it, make it race because the class really won't work in America. It worked in Mao's China. And I think from what everything that you've just said is that we're with Kamala's America, the nightmare scenario is that she will continue the policy of the Biden administration, the policies of the Obama administration before that,
Right.
to push us into this command control, unlimited government economy of Marxism where we lose our rights and our
Yeah.
freedoms.
Right. Well, just look at the way they're spending money right now. One of the notable features that Biden lied about is that he doubled the amount of debt that we're taking on every year. The national debt is they're spending $1.6 trillion dollars more than they take in by tax revenue. At this point, there is no link. Any taxes anyone pays, as far as I'm concerned, at this point, is harassment because the government doesn't need our taxes. No, they don't, because they do not live within the context of appropriated dollars. That is, as we know, appropriation is a process Congress has authorized for them to fleece us. And within that context, the government brings in about 1.4 trillion. It spends about 1.6 beyond that under Biden. And the reason they're doing that is because it builds government, it builds dependency, and it builds a reliance on the government by not only people at the micro level, but the macro level. They're funding all of these green projects. Joe Biden spent $370 billion dollars in their Green New Deal. Well, you're not going to see a cent of that. I'm not going to see a cent of that. That all went to their pet projects, which relate to control of energy, control of means of production of energy. That's what that's all about. And we funded it. And this is why I fault even the Republican members of Congress. You're funding your own demise. You don't understand that there's no crisis. And let me just hit that real quick one more time. You can't measure climate in years. Each climate cycle we now know runs about 10 to 11,000 years. Mankind has not been civilized within the context of one single climate cycle. So we just don't know. Now, are there trends right now saying there's more introduction of heat? Yeah, a little bit, but nothing that's going to change civilization. And notably, one of the things that they ignore is that CO2, which is their big evil pollutant, it's not. It's plant food. At this point, at this moment in time, there are 3.04 trillion trees that I'm looking at right now outside my window, and each tree consumes on average 48 pounds of CO2. Now, that tells me two things. First, that's multiply 48 by 3.04 trillion. We don't have a CO2 problem. As a matter of fact, if you want to increase green, if you want to have more growth, you increase CO2. So if man is contributing to it, it's not a bad thing. And oh, by the way, speaking of that, at the moment we're speaking, there is approximately not even zero. It's 0.04% of the atmosphere is CO2. It's 0.04. It's less than a fraction of a percent. We, mankind, contribute 0.0016 of the 0.04.
So no matter
So
what we
what
do, no
it
matter, even if we could get China and all the third world nations
doesn't matter.
involved, if we all had, I don't know, zero carbon footprints or whatever, it
Doesn't
wouldn't
matter.
make a
It means
difference.
nothing.
Some of us know and have read and done study and realize that the planet used to have up in Siberia, far north, jungles.
Yes.
I
Oh, of
mean, you
course.
find that
There was
in
times of
the
much higher CO2. Absolutely. and they tend to ignore that. So, and I'm saying if you actually go where they want to go with this, if they're successful in diminishing CO2 down to zero point 0.3 or below, life ends. The actual carbon cycle would stop. All plant life would die. So to me, to proceed with the idea of reducing carbon is insane because the very essence of every cycle we have, either plant, animal, or otherwise, you go below 3% down to zero point 0.2, we die. We die as a species. And if you go up to 4, well, or 5, point 0.0405, you can actually have more growth. To your point, the planet would be greener and probably a little bit warmer. And there's nothing wrong with that, especially when you're facing an additional, billion people you have to feed. Well, having longer growing periods and more green probably would help you. But that's part of the issue. Their issue is not saving the planet. It's trying to get rid of mankind. That's their real agenda. They want to limit mankind and reduce that.
How, if you control energy, you control housing, price controls, um, lawfare, on an international scale, buying into these United Nations mandates and treaties. When you control education, when you control every
Right.
aspect, every institution that affects our lives, you control the people. There is the
Absolutely.
Constitution is essentially wiped out de facto. It goes because everything supersedes it.
Right. And the New York Times recently, within the last 10 days, did an article, I think it was last weekend, where they said the Constitution is quote unquote is dangerous
It
because it
is the
goes against the
danger.
very things.
And they
Yeah.
they did they've done other articles like that. I was just researching that the other day, that the Constitution is the problem. And one of the solutions
Right.
that I read, this will probably blow your mind, was from Harvard. This is right in the context of the article, um, that in order to combat this constitutionalism and free speech, because the First Amendment's a problem too, they say,
Oh yeah.
we need to add not two new states, that would be Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C., a little tiny city being a state. No, they want to make Washington, D.C., Harvard does, into a multitude of states. So it wouldn't be 52 states. It'd be, I don't know, 53, 54, 55. And they would essentially, through those machinations, be amending the Constitution, or no, wiping out the Constitution.
Right.
What do you think the risk? What will she do day one and in the first 100 days?
Well, it's more about who will she appoint to do this, and I think she would go back to the Obama bench. I think what they're seeking to do is make this Obama the fourth term of Obama because he had two. Hillary was supposed to be three, didn't make it. She didn't get it. Trump came in. So this is Obama's third term right now, the Biden administration. And make no mistake, Obama has been the one behind the scenes. Susan Rice, Valerie Jarrett have been his go-to folks to get things done, and the whole clan of folks, Blinken, Sullivan, all Yellen, they've all been very much focused on what Obama wants, not Biden. Biden is rightly pointed out by President Trump yesterday. Like nobody knows where he's at. I don't think he could make a decision if his life depended on it. So he's been literally a pass-through, and Kamala is going to be that next pass-through. So it's more about who does she appoint. But what she would permit is an immediate continuation of the new Green Deal. They would say, well, we got to do more. We didn't do enough, and if you just give us a little bit more power, we'll reduce inflation. And she's already proposed the whole price control thing, which most rational people, to include those on the left who are rational, know that would instantly crash the economy. This whole idea of $25,000 per house, all that would do is inflate the housing market and make it even more difficult to buy houses. She's talked about wanting to build 3 million new houses. Boy, if you want something to not happen, have the government do it. They tried this with
But the
Peter
money will
Buttigieg
be
regarding,
appropriated, won't it?
yeah.
It'll be
Oh, the money will go
appropriated.
to
The
all
money
their
will
cronies. Yeah.
go, but nothing will happen. Just like her AI and border control and everything else that
Yeah.
she's been
All
involved
that.
with.
And Peter Buttigieg is, was given the task of creating a green infrastructure for cars, to have charging stations. They're supposed to have something like 10,000 in 3 years. They barely have five. So if you want something not done, give it to the government to do. And so she would do more of that, and she would say, "Yeah, we've made mistakes, but just give us more money. We'll do it this time." And then also regarding the overall direction of society regarding illegal immigrants, she said what she's going to do is the moment that there's pressure is gone, they're going to reopen the border. And what they're trying to do is create a permanent underclass. I don't necessarily subscribe to replacement theory. I think it's more about getting enough people who are below the poverty line, who have to depend on the government, who will constantly vote Democrats to keep them in, especially in some of the areas they've been shipping these folks.
Do you
That's what it's
think
all about.
I agree with those two reasons, but I also think it's about a cultural revolution. If you use demographic reengineering, it's just sort of like reengineering in the government school system, reengineering
Yes.
anywhere where which American society is so superb because of its foundational
Yeah.
constitutional and
Right.
obviously the Declaration of Independence, but our constitutional documents and our system of government is such that we have more protections in place than virtually every country on the face of the earth.
Right.
And because
Right.
of our independent Judeo-Christian worldview that just goes back and is so deeply ingrained over these last several hundred years, we're just a harder, you know, rock to break. And
Right.
so they have to use something to overturn that. And they've done the long march through the institutions. It still hasn't gone as well as they would like. They should have had victory by now. So one way to do that, okay, I'm here. I don't want to feed you things, but this is what I'm
Yeah.
thinking, is that when you do demographic reengineering, you bring, like you said, a permanent underclass. You bring in voters who can't even speak the language. Forget,
Right.
literacy tests. I'm saying, do you even know the name of the person that you're voting for, or are you just checking off the box that you were told to check? They can't know our Constitution, our traditions, or anything.
Right.
So what they
Right.
do is undermine it, because if you bring in 10%, 20, 30% of this kind of a population that overturns everything about your culture and your law and your protections, your freedoms, then you've amended the Constitution again. It's just another way
Right.
to amend it. And then, but there's always plausible deniability. We didn't intend that. Well, that's not what
Right.
we did. No, no, no. But also it breaks down our economy. So you're bringing in the permanent underclass, but you're also making our current lower level class in America in terms of wealth into a further reduction in their living
Right.
lifestyle, because they're having to compete with an uneducated minority that will just take whatever wage that you can give them.
Right.
So they're
So let
destroying
me
the
help.
economy.
Yeah, let me make some points on that if I could. So first, I'm a Reagan guy, but Reagan made a huge mistake. He permanently allowed California to become blue when he granted amnesty back in the mid '80s. That was a huge mistake because they promised you grant amnesty this one time and we'll shut the border. Well, they didn't. They lied to him, and of course, Reagan, being Reagan, was a guy who thought that he was wrong. And I'm friends and mentors. I'm mentored by and friends with a lot of his former cabinet. So I've been very critical of that. But to that point, California culturally became left permanently. All the amazing things about California. Reagan was a governor, Republican governor. Well, that's never probably going to happen again in our lifetimes, because that one act put California on the trajectory of being a permanent progressive Democrat state. And along that same line, and this is why I have problems with Bernie Sanders and Kamala Harris. They keep talking about, oh, we support labor unions. No, you don't, because the moment you flood the country with cheap labor that works for a lower price than unions, eventually you're going to destroy the unions, because businesses are going to hire that less qualified but way cheaper labor. So you're actually doing things to undermine both the culture and fabric the unions, which they say was the backbone of the middle class, because, well, ultimately they want to destroy the middle class, and they're going to try to keep the unions on as long as they can so they don't see what's coming. Most union members, by the way, have woken up to what's going on. I think they recognize that this unlimited immigration, flooding, lowering the value of a unit of labor is not in anybody's interest. And Nancy Pelosi, the ultimate racist, oh, we need people to pick our crops in the field. Really? Well, you don't if you actually pay people reasonable wages, you wouldn't need people willing to come in and take those jobs. If you actually were supporting the American worker, you would make sure that there was a robust system of protection of labor, so Americans would want to take those jobs. No, instead, she wants to actually, and said the quiet part out loud. Well, who's going to clean the toilet in my condo? Who's going to do those tasks? Because they have created the conditions for this. And whenever they say things like that, they reveal who they really are. They are the racists, and they are all for having this permanent underclass that keeps them in power indefinitely. And one other thing, real quick, the left always gets American exceptionalism wrong. It's not about us being better than everybody else. That's not it at all. But they keep saying that. It's about the fact that Elon Musk, a South African, could come here and be an exceptional American. He can add to the fabric and richness of our society. That's American exceptionalism. That anybody can come here and have the protections of the Constitution and be a member of the Republic and do amazing things, because he wouldn't have that freedom. He couldn't have done in South Africa what he's done here. That's why people like him seem to want to come here still, is because of the very fabric of our republic that gives them the freedom and upward mobility to achieve those things. That's what the left wants to destroy.
I read a report, I wanted to dig it up again, where this canard of they will do the jobs Americans refuse to do.
Yeah.
So we need those jobs done. But the data completely falsifies that
Yeah.
Americans do these jobs. What happens is they get pushed out of the jobs because they're unwilling to take, slave labor wages, which is what the
Exactly.
major
Precisely.
corporations. And so, it used to be that non-Hispanic people were housekeepers. It used to be that non-Hispanic people did lawns. And I mean,
Right.
there's nothing to be ashamed of. When I was young, I cleaned bathrooms and I did all those kinds of things. I waitressed, I did everything like that. What's wrong
Right.
with that? But Americans have been pushed out of that because there's a permanent immigrant population that will take those jobs. And so now they do
Right.
look as if they are, that no American will take it, that the data doesn't back it up. You said something I
Right.
found very compelling. But when you brought up the fact that Ronald Reagan, my beloved Ronald Reagan,
I love Reagan. I'm a
yeah.
Reagan guy.
No, I'm upset that he didn't dismantle the Department of Education like he promised.
Yeah.
But what,
Yeah.
and I've always been concerned about this amnesty thing that he did and I never read the details about it. But I think what you're saying to us is this: here is a patriotic president who was a great president. And
Right.
he was bamboozled, duped by the left because they had an agenda. He took a man at his word and believed this party that they would not allow illegal immigration anymore. So
Right.
Reagan did the amnesty thing, and California, a permanent leftist Marxist blue state that is a failed state today.
Yeah.
It is a failed state, is the result. And that the key was,
Right.
and they knew that mass immigration would be a demographic reengineering of the state. And this is where they want Texas and Florida, and
Yep.
we're all border
Absolutely.
states now. And so
Yeah.
to me,
That's why Pelosi pushes it so hard. Yeah.
right. And to me, that is to nail down this one catastrophic nightmare scenario of Kamala's America. It is that there is the demographic re-engineering of America that's happening in front of us, but she will put it on steroids.
Absolutely. Well, again, they've got successful models to look at. As California, in their view, is successful. It's doing this is what well, our side always says, "Oh, they're doing all these things, they're making mistakes." No, 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 no. This is deliberate. This is deliberate. It's like because I think people on our side really are good natured. Oh, they're
I
just
know.
misinformed. They just it's like no, 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 no.
When
They're
when
doing
are they
this. This
going
is
to,
all by
fix this
design.
problem at the border? They are fixing the problem at the border. The border was
The way they want it.
closed. Now
Yeah,
they fixed it.
right.
The gate's wide open. I know we have to be more precise with our terms, don't we?
Well, we have to get past our own projection of our good tendencies on them. There is no goodness over there. I've had to come to this conclusion. I have friends on the left. I look, I was advising Tulsi Gabbard when she was a Democrat, and Tulsi woke up. Tulsi figured out that yeah, my side, they're lying, and she left. And I think others like her, RFK Jr., they're all recognizing that the principles that they thought were important, like free speech, protecting the rights of the individual, making sure that individuals had a good paying job, unions were important. Those are no longer principles of the Democrat Party. They don't exist. They say they do, but they don't. And to the point that I think we're trying to get at here is that they have implemented economic socioeconomic models which create the outcomes they want. California is the ultimate display of their undermining institutions, their undermining education, and turning it into a state focused, state run complex that doesn't actually serve the people. It serves the Democrat Party. And the Democrat Party at this point is Marxism in America, and all the Green New Deal, the green stuff, all the crying that we need to control carbon. We need to move. They want to move like 30% of their cars to the grid, which would crash the grid. These things aren't accidental. They know the facts. We know. I mean, everything I know, they know. They just politicize it and find a convenient way to lie about it and try to convince others that, oh, we're trying our best. Like, come on. They spent $24 billion on homeless. My goodness sake, you could buy every homeless person a $150,000 home with that and give them a house. They don't want to solve the homeless problem. It gives them power. No.
I do believe there's graft, much graft there as well, just because, Biden crime family, they did that for the money. And
Right.
Pelosi and other members of Congress that have, trade on the stock market because they've got inside information. Money is and prestige. Prestige.
Yep.
I will often hear oddball thing. Well, to me, it's oddball thing at being, a Christian that people don't go into government for the money because it doesn't pay that much. And I think, are you nuts? To have a cushy job of prestige, you get the best table in the restaurant. You're flown around the world. Everybody is kowtowing to you. You've got yes men surrounding you, and you've got a very great wage or salary. And then when you leave, you'll become a multimillionaire. I think that's an incentive. And I think that Democrats are very much in it for the money and the control and the power, the transformation of America.
No doubt.
Don't they just want to burn America to the ground?
Well, they do. I think one of the things they keep saying is that the founding fathers didn't get it right. That how can we trust all of these old men who were slave owners to have created a system which actually serves the people? Well, it did. It has. We're coming up on a 250-year anniversary of our republic, and the system of checks and balances is what was key. The founding fathers knew exactly what you just said. There's going to be politicians who are in it for themselves, that there's an inherent evil in the hearts of men. It is what it is. And so the founding fathers, knowing this, said, well, we've got to create a system of checks and balances, which will create overlapping and contrary PowerPoints, points of power in the government so the government can check itself, so that the judiciary can check the executive, so that Congress can check the executive or the judiciary. This was meant to be basically adversarial. The founding fathers wanted these governments.
The
They
Electoral
want, yes,
College.
the electoral college prevents democracy from happening. You don't want pure democracy. You don't want the majority to basically basically have dominion over the minority, to be able to basically demand they do things. So that's why you have the
Let's drill
dispersal of
down on
power
that for
across
a
the
minute.
nation. Yeah.
You, day one, she comes into office, first 100 days, those are arbitrary numbers, obviously, but people say it. She comes in, and it seems to me that the Supreme Court, the filibusters, Supreme Court, Electoral College, that they're going to want to nail these things down, their changes that they institute.
Right.
Do you think that those are three things that she will be very much intending to overthrow about our system of
Well, yes
government?
and no. Yeah. Look, Chuck Schumer has already said that they intend, if they have the majority, which I don't think they will in the Senate, they want to get rid of the filibuster rule, and that would require 60 votes, and that's what they intend to do. I don't think they're going to get it. I don't think it's going to go that way. I think if current trends continue, the Senate will be Republican, so that'll stop that. But it doesn't mean they're going to stop trying. But yes, they want to remove those things which slow democracy down. That's the key. That's why the Senate is supposed to be deliberative. The founding fathers created that 60 vote rule, or the idea of having some level of slowing things down so you don't have irrational acts of law inflicted on the American people. And so it's something that I think she would see if she could. The other thing regarding the Electoral College, they constantly speak out against it because they don't like the fact that states like Utah are given as much power in some ways as states like New York. And that and that's right. So that's why they don't like that. They don't want the dispersal of power. They want the power centralized in the federal government. So that becomes the Soviet. And I always call them the Soviet Democrats because they really do want to set up a Soviet system of democracy. Remember, the Soviet Union had elections. They had a democracy. They had one party, and that one party had elections, and everybody knew how they're going to turn out all the time, much like how Joe Biden got kicked out, just saying. So it is that's the system they want to have. And so she will work if she can, even if she didn't have the Senate and House with her. That's the direction they will go. I don't think it'll work. To your point, you said, I think they've been unsuccessful, less than successful in overwhelming some of the institutions which they want to get rid of. And I think this is one of them they can't.
If they overturn the Supreme Court, I mean, there's nothing is off the table. So
Right.
I'm not trying to project too much, but
No.
if they overturn the system of the Supreme Court, pack it, bring in 15, 16, 18 judges and put in term limits and start impeaching, the good guys, doesn't that work hand in hand with this phenomena that we're seeing where Biden is saying, I'm going to pay off student debt. Here's my payola for you,
Yeah.
for your vote. And then the Supreme Court or other courts say, no, that's not going to happen. Then he does it again. And then he does it again. He keeps pushing that envelope.
Right. Oh, they do
So,
that. Right.
so it's a constant, it's an erosion, water dripping on
Right.
the rock. It's eventually going to create a pit in there or a weakness. Do you think that there may be a combination where they transform or destroy the court and then they push it through and an unconstitutional measure just flies, a change in our constitution, because that has happened before in our history,
Yeah.
they may
So,
even be able to do it unconstitutionally, in other words.
well, they do. They count on the fact that even if it's unconstitutional, it's going to take time to slow them down. Biden knew exactly what he was doing when he declared the end to the student debt, and he knew he'd be overruled. Nancy Pelosi said he'd be overruled. They don't care. It's not about them trying to do the right thing. It's about how much they can get away with to continue to amalgamate power within the context of their party and the direction of things. So, and it's a globalism is what they want, and they want to basically have this one world government. They're moving all of the institutions towards that. The Democrat Party wants to amalgamate and amass power. That's why Democrats are always wanting the UN to come in and do things. And so it's all about how they can benefit themselves through subordinating us, the United States, to this larger global effort. Ultimately, their objective is to create feudal mercantilism all over the world. To basically have these fiefdoms, these states, these democracies, these large urban areas which dominate the nations, each nation. That's what they're seeking. and it's not hard to see that's what direction they're going. The question becomes, to your point, what will Kamala do to make that more rapidly happen? Well, they could go for the packing of the Supreme Court, but I think both, again, members of Congress are going to resist that. Uh, the Electoral College, you're going to have to go and have a constitutional convention to get rid of that. There's things that they just can't do yet, but they're going to try to push the envelope to your point, to erode the systems and institutions which protect the Constitution.
Let's go down through a few other areas. What are they going to
Sure.
do? Say Kamala takes office. She's sitting in the Oval. What is she going to do with regard to election integrity, fraud, and that whole
Well,
mess? I know you did some testifying as to the
oh yeah,
cybersecurity
quite a
threat
bit.
in Pennsylvania before 2020. I have a feeling
Right.
that Pennsylvania didn't take your recommendations. You were saying $150
No.
million need to be dedicated immediately and that it could be done. That was February of
Oh yeah.
2019, I think. And they had all the time
We
in the
ran the
world.
numbers.
They had
Yeah.
the time to fix it before the problems happened.
Right.
And
Of
they
course.
were the only state to have a paperless